The talk of this afternoon is springboard into action. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes when we go into action and we haven't exercised certain muscles, it's uncomfortable. So, are you ready to get uncomfortable? All right, let's do it. So the focus of this bike summit this year is equity in motion. Well, what is bike equity? Is equity the new trend in the bike world? Is equity the new check-off item on the next generation of grant applications? Is it the new trend? I hope not, for a lot of reasons. So, if it is the new trend, what does that imply, and how has equity been applied? In order to better understand what is bike equity or what it's not, I'd like to focus on three main things. I'd like to focus on how inequity is designed into our cityscapes, how equity is sometimes an afterthought as it is applied to our planning documents. And third, outline what are the basic conditions in order for equity to actually become a reality and flourish. So first, inequity is not an accident, it's by design. Inequity by design is woven in the skin of the people who have been hit by cars in our community. Here in San Diego, if you live in a low-income neighborhood, you are 10 times more likely to be hit by a car than if you lived in another neighborhood. And I'm sure the same is true throughout many cities in California. And that is not by accident, that is by design. Inequity has been designed into the fabric of children's lungs who reach for their inhaler to get through recess. I'm going to say the F word here, freeways. Truth of the matter is, if you're a child who's growing up near a freeway, such as we have here in Barrio Logan, Sherman Heights, City Heights, San Ysidro, National City, it is a public health truth that your lungs function will be diminished. Inequity is designed into the policies that give police another reason, another legal reason to stop a black man or a brown woman from crossing a street where there is no crosswalk in either direction, a quarter of a mile in either direction. Punishing the victim of the built environment instead of the designer of it further perpetuates inequity. Equity as an afterthought. You may say, well, Monique, let's not get too uncomfortable here. Because our agency, our nonprofit organization, or I as an individual, believe in equity. And we incorporate it into our documents. We incorporate it into the language we speak, into the narratives we tell. We incorporate it. And we believe, yes, inequity is not by accident, it is by design. Just look at our city's climate action plan. Just look at our regional transportation plan. Just look at our business corridor plan. Just look at our organization strategic plan. We have a paragraph about equity. In our regional transportation plan, we have a whole appendix in the back about equity. In our climate action plan, we have a whole paragraph in the front of the climate action plan that talks about the importance of equity. Isn't that enough? I would say take a walk a few blocks down in Barrio Logan or in Sherman Heights, and they'd say that's not enough. Because equity, many times, is an afterthought and thrown into these documents in order to meet Title VI requirements, in order to give a nod and say to advocates, we did our due diligence, but it is an afterthought. Now, imagine this. Imagine if we treated environmental or economic considerations as an afterthought. And we had an equity plan, and we had a symbolic nod or a symbolic paragraph that talked about the importance of the economy or that talked about the importance of the environment. we would have people lining up at City Hall, lining up at our local MPO, waiting to testify, saying, isn't this issue important? We just had a regional transportation plan here in this region, passed a few weeks ago. And we had this huge environmental impact document, huge, about this thick. I know, because I read through most of it. And imagine if we would have had the same magnitude of analysis for an equity impact report, and the same legal metric requirements to reach equity metrics. Imagine what that regional transportation plan would look like. Well, I guarantee you, if that was the case, if equity was given the same consideration, we would not have the continuance of freeways being added through the heart of environmental justice communities. I guarantee you, that would not be the case. I guarantee you these communities would be prioritized when it comes to biking and walking infrastructure. Equity as an afterthought in these documents or in these planning processes does not bring us one step closer to ensuring equity is achieved. But in fact, it actually sets us back. Because the facade of equity is equity denied, with everyone in the room or at the ribbon cutting patting themselves in the back, further entrenching the system and further shutting out the community's voice. And you will see that no real change has been made, that the sidewalks have not been paved, they're still missing sidewalks, and that bike and pedestrian safety is not improved. So what are the conditions for equity? So what can be done in order to pave the pathway for equity? I'm going to talk about three conditions very quickly, and I'm sure there's a number of others that I'm missing. But the first is meaningful public engagement. What does that mean? There's a difference between input and influence. And you know it because many of you have sat in working groups, right? There's a difference between influence and input. Influence is you actually can change the direction of what is being planned. Input is you're talking, someone's taking notes, and it goes in an appendix. Meaningful public engagement also takes into consideration who is in the room. Community members are experts. I always find it hilarious, not hilarious, actually very sad, that oftentimes community voices, the average person on the street, are disrespected because maybe they don't have a degree that tells them bike infrastructure is important in their community, or have a degree that lets the public officials know why certain infrastructure is important in their community. But they're the ones using the streets, the sidewalks daily. And they have local knowledge. So the second condition is context and value-based solutions. There's a difference between community-driven solutions versus imported design-based solutions. And what does this mean? Well, we need to understand local stories and local context. Let me tell you a story. So I work in environmental justice communities, and oftentimes what's said is, I am afraid if they put a bike lane in my community, I'm going to be pushed out of my community. Why? Because gentrification is real. So we need to have very real and deep conversations and holistic conversations that move beyond design, but that move to the local context. And 3, and this is where things get really uncomfortable, if you weren't already, is the prioritization of resources. When you start at a place of imbalance, it will require an equitable approach to address that imbalance. And this is what equity is all about. A few months ago, I was sitting in a building right over here, City Hall, having a conversation with a few other folks with the mayor's staff and regarding the city budget. And she said, no, we're going to do things equitably. We have the same amount of money going south of the 8, where a lot of the environmental justice communities are, and north of the 8 in regards to bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And I looked at her and I said, that's not equity. And she happened to have a pile of business cards sitting in front of me. So I grabbed the business cards, and I gave her one business card, and I gave her staff member 3 business cards. And I said, let's talk about equity. I want to be equitable like the city. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 business cards and your staffer 2 business cards. So now she's left with 3, staffer left with 5. Is that equitable? No, because we are starting at a place of imbalance. The same is true when you look at our local streets and roads. You don't have to be a planner or a transportation engineer to know that there's inequity in our communities. All you have to do is walk down the street, ride your bike down the street, and you see it, you feel it, you experience it. Because we're starting at a place of imbalance, the solutions have to take that into consideration. Now, that means there's many bike implementation plans, and they have a list of bike infrastructure projects. Well, that means we are going to have to prioritize certain communities that have historically been neglected. And the city may say, well, we have a city prioritization policy. Here it's 800-14. I've read it a million times. And there's an equity checkbox and consideration there. And they're saying that's how we're taking equity into consideration. But it's not enough. So many of you are probably like looking at your brochures or what have you and like, I'm in the wrong room, I think. I think we were here to talk about bikes. Like, did I enter the wrong room? No, you didn't. You know, it's my sincere hope that we're here to talk about equity this summit. And that we do it in a thoughtful way. And the reason being is because overburdened communities cannot afford equity to be the new trend in the bike world. Issues of displacement, economic mobility, racial profiling, and safety are all at risk. Equity cannot be an afterthought. It must be a goal that dictates what we do and do not do when it comes to bike infrastructure, policies, and education. That's why I hope that when we enter these conversations throughout the summit, that we enter them with the mindset that one way to travel along the bumpy pathway towards an equitable city can be on 2 wheels. Thank you.